And the way a woman behaves can be the subject of gossip. And in a society governed by honor and shame, her behavior that is considered deviant can lead the clan's honor, the family's honor, her brother's honor, to be smeared, reduced, violated. The way to deal with it is to ensure that she is a virgin before her wedding night, and as soon as she's married, that she's faithful. So the education that a girl gets from a very young age is to be very chaste, stay at home, be obedient, and guard her virginity. When she's married, to be obedient and serving and submissive to her husband. That is enforced in different ways by different families. Some families, like mine, like my grandmother, ensure that you undergo female genital mutilation and you are covered or you stay at home. It's preached over and over to you what could happen to you if you were to violate the honor of the family. In places like Saudi Arabia, the entire society is segregated into the male side and the female side, including the house, including the home. Women are covered up, they are denied to go outside their houses without chaperones. The situation in Saudi Arabia, I think most Americans are familiar with. I don't have to describe that. Now, in coming to Holland, the problems that Westerners like the Dutch and the British and the Americans are confronted with are Muslim families trying to enforce that vision of the position of women here in the United States, where women have radically different rights and are considered to be equal to their male counterparts and are considered to be able at adulthood to choose their own lifestyles, make their own money, and have access to education. And in fact, it is considered to be something great and positive to encourage women to take part in the workforce, etc. And there you have a collision. There you have a clash of civilizations. How do you value the female? How do you value the relationship between men and women? What governs that? And that value, I can't think of anything where the West and Islamic countries are more different in their outlook than the way women are valued and their contribution to society.
How does one deal with that? You mentioned Samuel Huntington. He was my professor at Harvard, and his writings on the clash of civilization you have referenced and you do subscribe to. But now, how does one deal with it? Is there a type of series of actions or steps that could be taken to deal with that?
I would start with a series of assumptions. And one assumption would be, if you compare the two value systems regarding women, the West and the Islamic, which one do you consider better? If you assume, I do, that the Western value system regarding women is better, then we are confronted with the next step, which is, do you preserve or allow these communities to preserve their ways regarding women, or do you refuse to accept that? And I think Professor Samuel Huntington would say, on American soil, I don't think he would propose changing them elsewhere, but on American soil, on Western soil, I think he would say we should not practice relativism there. We should protect the rights of all individuals, regardless of their heritage, on American soil. That entails a policy that protects the victims of Islamic culture, female Islamic culture, and the punishment of the perpetrators, but also a sustained education in Muslim men and women to give up their attitudes toward women and their practices and their habits, and to adopt new ones.
Where does the Universal Declaration of Human Rights fit into this? Because that provides a standard for all men and women and the protection of human rights. Isn't that and shouldn't that be a factor in all societies, not just one?
It is a factor for all societies, but it is an ideal. In some places, that ideal has been reached. I think the United States is one of them. I don't think it's perfect and perfectly round, but I think most of what is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is actually implemented in the West. It is not in the rest of the world. One can say we are going to campaign as Westerners outside of the West for these universal rights, and that campaigning has delivered some results. Some countries have signed and ratified the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, even though they have not implemented it. You can keep pushing for that. What I saw, and this is the product of Infidel and Nomad, is even in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Holland, in France, places where the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as far as it regards women, has been adopted and implemented, that Muslim women are excluded from that, excluded from the protection of the law. There are Muslim lobby organizations in Canada, in the US, in the UK, lobbying for parts of Sharia to be accepted.
Describe what Sharia law is. I know here in the United States much has been written about it, but I'm sure our audience would be interested in hearing your definition of Sharia law.
Sharia law is Islamic law, or law derived from Islam. Islam means submission to the will of Allah, was founded by Muhammad bin Abdullah. He considers himself a prophet and is regarded by his followers as a prophet. Initially in Mecca, he had only preached an attitude toward humanity and toward one another of hospitality and charity, etc. Once in Medina, when he fled from Mecca, he went to Ethiopia, then called Abyssinia, landed in Medina, and once in Medina, his following became strong enough to form a militia or militias, and from being a peace-loving, peace-preaching prophet, he turned into a warrior, a conqueror. And at that time, when his following became so large, almost as large as a society at that time, he said that he had laws revealed to them that must govern that society. And that set of laws that were revealed to him and their further evolution is termed Sharia, or Islamic law. Now, you have to imagine those laws in the context of the 7th century, and as they evolved the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries. The laws governing women and men at that time were considered to be incredibly progressive. For instance, in the context of that Arab desert culture, which was very patriarchal, men were allowed to have an unlimited number of concubines. He reduced that to 4. Men could leave women at will. He decided that they should now have a dowry. He introduced the law of banning infanticide. In that context, little children, girls, if they were considered to be too many, were buried alive. He banned that. It was very, very progressive at that time. But if you take Sharia law from that time, 7th century, regarding women, and you apply it now in the 21st century, when countries like the United States are governed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and women are equal to men, and you disinherit women, they inherit half of what their brother gets. Their testimony is worth half of that of a man. They get a so-called dowry that is determined by a guardian, and that is not really what they want, or at least does not serve their interests. That when raped, they have to produce, they have to testify against the man who raped them, but their testimony is worth only half. All of these things, that they have to have a guardian, all of these things that in the 7th century seemed very progressive, in the 21st century are really very, very reactionary and detrimental to women. And that is my criticism on Sharia. Let's stop doing everything as we used to do and looking to the past and trying to revive the 7th century. Let's look forward. And to Western society, to Americans, let's not exclude women from the general law that applies to all of us only because they were born into Islam and only because the perpetrators justify their actions in the name of religion or culture.
Now, when your book came out, and just recently, the New York Times, Sunday Magazine, had you featured, and there were a series of questions asked in the magazine, and the title of it was Feminist. and it was casting you as a feminist. Do you view yourself as a feminist?
I view myself as a feminist in the classical sense of the word, when feminists fought for the rights of women, but these were rights that were a matter of life and death, and they were a matter of justice. I have encountered feminists who have a different set of priorities, feminists who feel that we should all organize ourselves in order to move in relationships between men and women, whether they are married or not, for the men to do their fair share of household chores. That's very important, but I'm not going to join such a movement. I think if you're intelligent enough, you will be able to sort that out yourself. Feminists who organize themselves to open the golf, all-male golf tournaments to become female golf, so women can be allowed into it. Very laudable, but I'm not a part of that. I just don't think it's a priority when children, little girls, are denied life, when they're pulled out of school, when they are being killed. There is a movement, or part of the feminist branch, who feel that shattering the glass ceiling is a great priority. It's not my priority. When I read about girls here in the United States who are taken by their father, put in a cab and shot and run over by their fathers, when all of this is going on, and I'm not even talking about China and India and all the terrible things that are done to women and against women, and that happens to Chinese women here and to Indian women here, I think that as feminists we should rearrange our priorities and say, you know, when it comes to violating the most basic rights of women, that getting rid of that and addressing that and fighting that should be our priority, and that the other parts of it, all very important but very luxurious, just go down on the list.
The United Nations had a series of Arab human development reports, and in those reports there were sections, in fact, devoted to women and areas in which women were denied rights or denied opportunities, especially in terms of voting, in terms of employment. Do you think that those kinds of reports can have some impact? Have you seen some change? Because clearly you're trying to get out certain messages about the kinds of changes and the kinds of opportunities. You have several messages in your book.
Yeah.
But do you think reports like that, where you have a report that is in fact written by Arab scholars, can be helpful to bring about change?
Absolutely. I know those reports, and I think they're extremely important in our time, because they start with acknowledging the fact that women are denied their freedom, that large swaths of Arab Muslim women are denied education, so that now in some countries you even have a 70% illiteracy among women. Mm-hmm. You have maternal mortality, you have child brides, you have forced marriages, you have stonings and killings. These reports were incredibly important because they acknowledge that there is something wrong. What I would like to do with others, I'm not the only one, is to take that discussion to the next level. Not only acknowledge the very despairing and terrible position of Arab Muslim women, but also acknowledge the causes that underlie them. In my case, especially those that have to do with the customs, the habits, the convictions, the religious justifications that are given for these atrocities. So it's not enough for all of us to come out and say, killing women is bad, child brides are bad. But why child brides? What is it that motivates a father to sell his daughter to another man for a little bit of money? To every father who has been questioned, he says, but the Prophet Muhammad did it. He is my moral guide. I am a Muslim. I'm following that guidance. Let us then discuss that guidance and investigate it and teach that man something new other than that guidance. That is the sort of thing, that is the step that we have to move, and that is the step that is taboo, and it's the most difficult step because we're talking about a 1400-year-old religion and tradition, and it's almost set in stone. It's not set in stone, things are moving, But that is the most difficult part of it, and that is really what, where all the work is going to be.